Hello, folks. Welcome to an edition of The Big Picture. We're looking at very many issues.
Big picture, big guests as usual, and big conversations. Christine Mungai, the curator at Baraza Media Lab.
Dr. Joseph Mugashia.
Julius Kamau.
Professor Kibuza Kibwana.
Is corruption still as prevalent or even worse right now?
Well, I think it is more dramatic. It's really killing the country. Actually, in Africa, maybe Kenya has, many laws. Kenya has many institutions, but there is no movement. There is no real movement in terms of, fighting corruption.
I think the president did make a good foundation activity the whole week.
Ridiculous.
No, it's true though. Can you imagine as the president, you're like, all goons come to me. That's crazy. It was so weird to see people stopping trucks in the middle of the way.
One tends to wonder whether this person who's supposed to be the symbol of national unity is leaving this trail of, destruction in his wake is truly a representation of how far we've fallen in terms of society, where we become this man-eat-man society. Is it more perception than it is reality, or is there realistically a problem with the time it takes for people to get justice served in court in Kenya?
No, justice is not a cloistered virtue.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know whether you have been to Nairobi. Just go and walk. Every day is like a baraza. It's like people have come from a meeting.
Yeah.
One of the best ways of looking at how an economy is working is to look at the behavior of the working class throughout the day.
I've told you, justice is a question about perception, how you view it.
Hello, folks. Welcome to an edition of The Big Picture. We're looking at very many issues.
Big picture, big guests as usual, and big conversations. Christine Mungai, the curator at Baraza Media Lab.
Dr. Joseph Mugashia.
Julius Kamau.
Professor Kibuza Kibwana.
Is corruption still as prevalent or even worse right now?
Well, I think it is more dramatic. It's really killing the country. Actually, in Africa, maybe Kenya has, many laws. Kenya has many institutions, but there is no movement. There is no real movement in terms of, fighting corruption.
I think the president did make a good foundation activity the whole week.
Ridiculous.
No, it's true though. Can you imagine as the president, you're like, all goons come to me. That's crazy. It was so weird to see people stopping trucks in the middle of the way.
One tends to wonder whether this person who's supposed to be the symbol of national unity is living. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and hello and welcome to another edition of The Big Picture, the podcast with great guests, interesting topics, and very, very broad and interesting perspectives. My name is John Allen Namu, and I feel like I say this every time both of you are here. It's like a parent who's having their children return. Yes.
Wow.
Justine is here, and so is Tom. Can you guys introduce yourselves? Because people might have forgotten how often you guys are away. Guys might not know your names.
My name is still Justine Wanda.
Yes, it still
and
is.
thank you so much for joining us today.
My name is Thomas Obana, and I'm glad to be here.
And we've got a wonderful guest in studio, and I did something that she might disagree with because she writes a lot on the subject of. Well, we'll hear what she writes about. But here's an introduction that I asked ChatGPT to do. I thought so. Look at the look on her face is classic. So anyway, to read Nanjala Nyabola is to see the world not just as it is, but as it could be, if power were honest and justice had a passport. A political analyst, writer, and thinker who refuses to be boxed in, Nanjala brings a rare blend of sharp academic insight and narrative elegance to every subject she touches. from digital authoritarianism to migration, and dares us to do the same. Please welcome Nanjala Nyabola.
I'm still mad at you.
I know.
That's nice.
Well, let me tell you, yeah, like an intro, like only an algorithm can deliver.
But I'm still mad at you for using the algorithm.
I'm sorry. I had to just poke the bear a little bit.
The bear is poked.
Yeah, Nanjala Nyabola, welcome to the Set on a Big Picture and welcome to the show. It has been ages. What have you been doing? Where have you gone?
Apparently, according to ChatGPT, I've been interrogating things. So
Yes.
that's nice to know. Working on some big projects that have taken up a lot of mental bandwidth. Doing a lot of writing in unexpected places. Sort of exploring more travel writing, exploring more nonfiction, fiction, sort of creative nonfiction. Hopefully some of that stuff starts to come up because I'm tired of it living in my head and on my computer.
Yes.
So just really trying to expand my weapons as a writer, exploring new genres.
Okay. Yeah, because you left us hanging there for a moment. Like you left
I
us
know.
with such a good book and then you just disappeared.
I know it's not so much disappearing as this latest stuff is a little bit different. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
And it takes a lot, you know, because it's like you're learning this stuff all again from scratch.
Yeah.
So it's I'm hoping that people receive it with the same enthusiasm as they've received some of the other projects. But also remember the other projects came out very quickly. So it
Yes.
was like 2018, 2020, 2022.
Yep.
And I wanted to take my time with this one. So hopefully whatever comes out next, people will receive as enthusiastically as they've received the other stuff.
Awesome,
So,
awesome.
yeah.
And just to note, Nanjala is an author of, well, not 2 books, but 2 books and a book that's
No.
reduced into like notes.
So yes, so
Yeah.
there's self-titled, there's
Yes.
2 and then 1, but there's also like I've had some great collaborators. So there's a lot of stuff that I've co-written, co-edited with a lot of other people.
Yeah.
But that's also writing, and that also takes a lot of time.
It is, but the spotlight is on you. So I just want to mention these books: Digital Democracy, Analog Politics,
Yes.
right? How the internet era is transforming politics in Kenya. That one in 2018 was a banger, I have to say.
thank
Like
you.
it was a really good book, right?
Thank you.
Then there was Traveling While Black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one.
I was like, you were just pointing at the white people, and you're like, can you see our experience?
Give me the money.
Yeah. And well, oh my gosh, there's actually 4. So there's Strange and Difficult Times, Notes on a Global Pandemic, and Where the Women Are, Gender and the 2017 Kenya Election.
Yeah.
I remember, this one was co-edited with Marie Emmanuel
Pomerol, yeah.
Pomerol.
Yes.
Okay, I got that right.
Yeah.
Justine was fangirling you here. So can you continue?
It was mutual.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
very
I
mutual.
don't have the words. Honestly, I don't. Because like every single time I'm online and I see like you've tweeted something and you're engaging with something, I'm like, I think I'm not learning enough. I need to do more. Like that's literally how much I interact with your work.
But I'm such a fan of you as well, Justine.
That
Like
is so
I'm always sharing your stuff with people. I think you're such a keen observer of the Kenyan condition and pointing out things that we kind of don't realize how absurd it is because we're so used to living in the sanatorium that we don't realize that you're all sort of in a very weird place. And I think that what you do
for
is
Kenyans
really great.
who don't know what a sanatorium is, we've just been told that we
Madare.
live in a crazy house.
Yes. Wearing an salad to Madari, guys. To
Tuko wote pamoja.
Yeah.
It's not just
Yeah.
tuko wote pamoja.
It's a collective, it's
All
a
right.
group activity.
So let's get into the show today. We've got lots to discuss. Obviously, there was the croc that was seen around the world, right? That was from yesterday, somewhere in Migori.
Yeah.
Flew in the trajectory of a very important person. We'll spend some time talking about that. There's obviously the finance bill that's coming up in 5 weeks now, with some change, right? And a lot of interesting topics in between, but let's navel gaze a little bit. Africa Uncensored's been producing one heck of a series on land tenure and land corruption. This is our second go at this. This is the second season of the series, and we produced episode 3 of Title Deals, which is, it's live now. It's on our YouTube page. And Joy and Sam and the team have done a fantastic job of exposing what exactly the problems are with land tenure in our country. If you watched the episode last week, it was completely heart-rending for the people in the older neighborhoods of Nairobi and the kind of limbo that they're in. But this third episode, I think for me was the clincher, because we went back to where it all began with some of the cases that we exposed in 2024 to find out whether there had been progress in terms of the cases of justice or seeking of justice by some of the people who were, we featured. Avani Shah, she of the infamous Westlands, land grab, as well as the proprietors of Everready Security in South Sea. This is a trailer for that episode. Take a look.
In the next episode, we return to Westlands and South B in Nairobi, two neighborhoods where forceful evictions and demolitions disrupted lives and livelihoods.
I have worked to buy this house. It wasn't very easy. So I'm not giving it up on it. And I'm going to have it back. Wait for me, I know I have it back.
Unapiga picha. Kama iko kugopa, then you should be worried. If you don't have anything to worry, then you wouldn't worry.
2 years later, what has changed? What hasn't? And what does it say about land justice in Kenya today?
We've been out of this place for 2 years until today, 2024, is when we are back to our premises. I mean, it's shocking to see what we found.
It seems that Kenya is run by goons and not by police.
Episode 3. Go and check it out. It really is an important story to watch if you're a Kenyan, an important story to watch if you're interested in buying land or you're interested in using the land that you have. Raises really, really critical questions about the tenure of land, the provenance of title deeds, and just how safe it is to make investments in this country. And, I have to say, as a person who's watching it, observing it, and, maybe considering buying land in this country, it really gives you pause. And it's such a shame that we're talking about this in our country in 2025. Nanjala, I don't know whether you've been brave.
The whole title deed system is indicative of like a broader transformation or even a collapse that's happening.
I'm glad that you said that, Nanjala. And the one question that I'm hoping that we can answer through or in the course of this conversation is exactly that. What does something like title deeds say about the system in which we live, the country in which we live, and more broadly, what does it say about us as individuals, right? But like as I said, we've got a lot to get through, and title deeds is not the only series or piece of work that we are producing or have produced recently. The young man, Tom Mukwana, has just come up with another story today, 3 hours ago, in fact, and it's talking about the conflict of interest in independent power producing deals between Kenyans and Kenya Power and one company in particular that might have gained off of a conflict of interest. But one of the cliff notes, if you'll allow me, Tom, and one of the highlights, if I'm giving cliff notes here, from the story was how this particular power producer is charging double the amount that independent power producers charge, right? And independent power producers, on average, charge 57 shillings per unit of power, right?
Yes.
On average,
yes.
right?
Just crazy to know.
It's absolutely insane.
Because even a unit of power doesn't go for that much.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And this is what really irks me about, this kind of a story, Tom. Like, you spend a lot of time doing this and showing the conflict of interest and showing where the problems are with regard to how we use power in this country. And then weeks from now, you will hear a minister in terms of industrialization saying how we're making efforts to reduce the price of power, the cost of power. You can't do that when in the system you have people who've been benefiting for years, because this particular producer has been part of this system for what? For how long?
For almost 2012. So that's almost 13 years over.
Yes.
That's a whole teenager.
That's a whole teenager. That's someone who's a class 8, isn't it?
That is true.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's true.
Not class 8 anymore.
Oh yeah.
One year before my son was born. Hey,
Wow.
gosh,
Yeah.
it's just been, So anyway, like, guys, go to africancensored.online and read the story, share it. You might get a better understanding of why your power bills are so high, right? So now, let us get into the discussion of today that flew onto our timelines yesterday, quite literally. President William Ruto, while making an address in Migori County, gets hit somewhere in the region of his face and his arm by a croc, a shoe. And everybody assumes that someone, out of frustration or what have you, threw it. And there's a bit of a line that we need to walk here. And Nanjala, I'll ask you to chime in first. Because whereas that is a highly unusual event in Kenyan politics, it's not that unusual globally, right? As an expression of frustration, etc. But how I want to nuance this is that we saw another angle today. And what it looks like is like the guy was holding the crock like this, and someone slapped it out of his hand, and then it flew in the direction of the president.
Yeah.
That's fine. The reaction is what I want us to settle on. What kinds of reactions did you see? And what does it tell you about the state of the presidency and whether it is in conflict or in congruence with the occupier of the presidency right now?
Oh, so we start with an easy question.
The easiest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the act of throwing a shoe at a visiting head of state, because we're thinking about the Iraq case here, it's not unprecedented, right? It's happened in the past, usually as a expression of frustration. And I think that's what a lot of people were hoping, that it was an expression of the low intensity frustration that's been, it's not even low intensity anymore, but the simmering frustration that has settled in the country, particularly after the finance bill protests, but I would say even a little bit before that. I think the finance bill protests were a culmination of this feeling of being chronically unheard by the state, of this feeling of, we are trying all of the non-violent, all of the peaceful things, and we're getting shut down left, right, and center. And I think that was the same in Iraq as well. By the time George Bush had that shoe thrown at him, there had been this expression by Iraqi people that, we had a life. It wasn't a perfect life. Saddam Hussein was not a great president, but, we had a life. We had this multi-faith, multi-sect community, and we lived, and people were able to be teachers and engineers and whatever, and now we are unable to drive down the road. They created this green zone that was supposed to be a peaceful zone, and it was basically an illusion that was sustaining the Western sort of presence in Iraq. So I think what you're seeing with a lot of people is this, is someone finally saying things that people are muttering under their breaths. I think, if you talk to people, one of the things that struck me most about Kenya in the last couple of months, years really, is that people are no longer masking their frustration. Usually there is an element of tunasukumana tu, tutafika tu, and now it's like the first thing that's on people's mind. This is unsustainable. You know, I go to the supermarket yesterday, and I was buying some very small things, and I looked at the total. I was like, "Are you serious? That's crazy number." And the cashier said, "You're Kenya yetu squeezy," and I think that's what people are reaching towards. Is someone actually saying something that we're all muttering under our breaths? Is someone saying something that we're all talking about, you know, in private? And I, like you said, there's a different angle. It's not necessarily clear what happened, but people's reaction to it, I think, to me, speaks to this simmering anger, frustration that we've noticed over the last couple of months.
Justine, how many jokes have you written about?
So many. Respectfully, as in, I just had to stop. You know, I had to go to sleep at some point. I was like, I had to wrap this up somewhere.
Yeah.
I just say, katika shughuli na pilka pilka. Tafadhali angalia kule kiatu kinatoka. Like, you have to be aware of your surroundings. I think the funniest part to me is like how his voice just kept disappearing because he couldn't like construct the sentence afterwards because he was like, what just happened? And like, everyone saw me. This is so embarrassing. Like, it was like, it was a nice cringe moment for him to have. And I think more politicians should understand that for a lot of Kenyans, like, someone hitting you with a shoe is probably nothing. Like, you'll just, like, people will make memes and like they'll move on with their life because to us that's not like a frustrating point. But on the other extreme of things, people have been shot. And we've seen the reaction from the political class, which is so degrading.
People die all the time.
Yes, people die all the time.
We mourn
we sympathize and we move on. And like, it's saying like, oh, we don't have to, because like Baby Pendo's case was thrown out, I think today, right? Because the DPP said there's not enough evidence. And it's not just Baby Pendo only that was shot. 39 other protesters were also killed. And there's a frustration there because like, this is extrajudicial killings just being accepted and like state sanctioned violence being like, oh, this is like a trophy that they get to carry after every single big moment for a lot of Kenyans. So people making fun of the president is not just like a moment of frustration. It's saying we're going to keep speaking out as much as we can in whatever way we can until you start to listen.
Interesting. Tom, this is a great place for you to chime in because as a journalist who essentially, to borrow Nanjala's words, who writes or says a quiet part out loud with evidence, what do you make of a moment like that? Is it walking a line very finely on the legal side of things between dissent and expressing your displeasure, or have we crossed into the territory where now it's dangerous? What's your view?
I don't think we've reached a level where it's dangerous, and I say this because it's a shoe. It's a shoe. It's a shoe.
It could have been something else.
It could have been something else, but it's a shoe. Right? At the end of the day, it was a shoe. And some people, like Justine said, didn't go home after protest because they didn't get a shoe thrown at them by a bullet. And I'd like to insist on this. I watched the service right before the day, when the shoe was thrown on Sunday, right?
Yes.
The service a few hours before, actually. And
Stop it, Justine. We shall throw you off.
It took a second. A second for me to connect. But so these politicians were taking turns in front of audiences saying things, right? 2027, he's coming back into the office. This is the first president in over 50 years who's given Nyanza the attention that Nyanza deserves. And these representatives are the same representatives that I remember while covering the protests in March last year, but 2023. These were the same people who were lining up in morgues, lining up bodies in morgues. I remember it was a red clothing,
cloth,
right? And I remember the names and the toe tags at that time. And then these are the same people rolling the red carpet for this president and singing all praises for him. To
Yeah.
me, that shoe was representative of frustrations. And what I believe is that, and there's evidence to back this, and NTV did a whole documentary on this, these are hired crowds, most of them. Right? No one in their right mind would go to a presidential rally in Kenya right now to cheer after everything that they've seen. That's a hired crowd. To me, it felt like the right moment for him to witness dissent that shook him to the core. Because he looked scared, which is good, because a lot of people didn't get the opportunity to even be scared before they went 6 feet under.
Absolutely.
And they were celebrating, you know, a lot of the people who got shot. It was a moment of joy that was turned around and complete in a second. So
And it coming off of the heels of such an intense week where our collective memories were sort of revived of the June protests. And then in that same week, the Member of Parliament for Kasipul Kabondo dies. A day after, Major Bashir from Mandera North says, you know, we mourn and we move on, only to find out that the character of this Member of Parliament is, shall we say, not beyond reproach. Like Caesar's wife would be like, yo, man, as in, for real?
For real.
Yeah. But my thoughts on this are, so from all of last week, and perhaps this coming on a Sunday, capping it off, I'd been thinking about this famous/infamous interview that Malcolm X gave. In the immediate wake of the murder of JFK. So he was asked, what do you think of this? And he was like, well, these are chickens coming home to roost. What he meant, of course, was that in a climate of hatred, you expect hate. You expect that things like these start to happen when a climate of hatred has been cultivated. And for what it's worth, in as much as the shoe throwing or shoe flying might not have been intentional, I see this in the reaction. So yes, people are saying the quiet part out loudly. But what I'm also seeing is it's no longer just brazen, naked anger, right? It's anger that is turning now almost towards a blind rage at the president, at the presidency, at the government, and all of this baked into a place where we are in a very low trust, society. And for me, that's a very unsustainable place for Kenya to be in. Like, it's a very unsustainable place, and not only does the politics have to get fixed or fix itself, we really need to have a moment of reckoning about where exactly it is that we are going, right? Because today it's a shoe, right? And if a shoe can hit the president, what of the Member of Parliament who goes and says some nasty stuff inside the precincts of Parliament and then walks out expecting to be, to walk unmolested? They are literally goading, members of the public into acting against them. And for me, whether they deserve it or not, I just don't think that is a sustainable way to be able to maintain a peaceful country that can talk through its problems and,
Can I to your point, Kenya cannot sustain itself in the moment that it is right now. And I feel a lot of people need so much more hope in their lives, and they're not getting it anywhere. Even usually when people go home, like when your parent comes home, there's a feeling of collective hope. Like tomorrow, if today was difficult, like your mom will hug you, your dad will give you like words of affirmation if he's that kind of dude. I don't know, he's gonna create, he's gonna create an environment where you feel some kind of hope. But for a lot of homes, a lot of people are in despair. Like in your own families, those conversations are not happening anymore because no one feels like anything is changing. Everyone is just looking around and is like, "What gonna do? Ata miss na do." It's like a moment of such hopelessness that has been bred into people's lives, and we are expecting that, the tide will turn with a new president. The tide will turn with someone who kind of affirms us. But also internally, Kenyans are a little lost. Like that's what I feel like for a lot of people.
In literary terms, this would be called the dark night of the soul.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and Nanjala, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I have a slightly different perspective. Audre Lorde has a great essay about anger, the usefulness of anger. And I think part of the reason why change has been so difficult to engender in Kenya is because when we get angry, we talk ourselves out of it. When it gets to the point where we're like, actually, this is the thing, we talk ourselves out of it. But at the same time, the things that made us angry haven't gone away. So, you know, in chemistry, they talk about entropy and how a system can look stable, but because of the way the molecules are arranged, the molecules are actually very random and they're moving around. And so you could have, the example I always give is like H2O and H2O2, same atoms, right? One is water, the other one is
Hydrochloric
hydrochloric. No, that's not it. That's HCl.
No. Yeah.
But
my chemistry teacher. I'm sorry.
Poleni sana.
All right.
We're trying. We're doing a thing here.
Yes.
But the idea is that one of them, if you put a piece of paper in it, nothing will happen. It will just get wet. If you put a piece of paper in the other one, it might catch fire. And so what's happened in Kenya is over the last 30 years, the level of entropy in the system, and I'm 30 years, maybe not even, a little bit more than 30, I'm going back to 1992. The level of entropy in the system keeps rising because we keep getting more and more people who have legitimate grievances that are not being addressed. You start with post-election violence in 92. Those people have never been, they've never received justice. 97, never received justice. 2007, never received justice. 2017, Baby Pendo was an election, was election violence, right? People went rampaged through Western Kenya, and nobody was ever held accountable for it. Madare, people got killed.
Christina's helped. Christine Mungai says it's hydrogen peroxide.
Hydrogen peroxide, thanks, Chris.
Thank you,
Christine. We love you, Chris.
Yeah.
But the idea is basically that there's a growing number of people who have legitimate grievances that are not being addressed. And we keep adding to that critical mass. We keep adding to that number. And then when they express their anger, we say, let's calm down. Keep cool heads. But the things that they're mad about never get addressed. Add to that the fact that it's the same cast of characters. It's the same
It's
cast
the same guys.
This is the worst Groundhog Day in history because we're reliving the same election every 5 years. And so I think rather than talking people down from the anger, the question is, how do we make this anger useful? How do we channel this anger towards organizing? How do we get people angry enough to talk to their neighbors about the things that make them mad and do something about it? How do we get people to the point where they are reading more, learning more, investigating the root causes of their anger, and then sort of turning it into something more productive? I think diffusing the anger will not solve the underlying issue. I think more importantly is how do we make this anger useful? And that's the challenge that I think befalls all of us as Kenyans. Are we talking to our family members about this stuff? Are we talking about how the bills are hitting us harder this month? Are we, so that people don't feel like they're suffering alone?
On their own, yes.
And I think that's how they've managed so far to keep us isolated from each other, is because everybody feels like they did something wrong. I'm the only one who went to university and didn't get a job. I must be doing something wrong. I'm the only one who is struggling with paying bills. I must be doing something wrong. I'm the only one whose kids are going to school. No, you're not. It's a systemic
It's all
problem.
of us.
It's all of us. Let's talk about it.
You know, sorry,
really
go ahead.
Your perspective. I just wanted to add something really small. A friend of mine was having a conversation online. So someone had written a tweet and they were like, I think Central has developed because of their proximity to power. They have water because the government gave them water. And then someone could Twitter that and is like, this is foolish because a lot of the water that you see flowing to people's homes, it was because the communities built those infrastructures. Like people went out, got together, like got into cooperatives, and then someone was like, oh, I didn't know this. And then someone else quoted it again and said, I do understand there's a level of disparity that happens for people who live in arid areas, people who are isolated from the system. They feel like only these guys get resources. But that conversation, I think that's the thing that kind of shifts like the center of like that anger. Like people, like you stop feeling like you're entitled, And also you do understand like someone else has like a pain point that has not been addressed. And then now people start to have conversation. I thought that was really beautiful because instead of like just cussing each other out, it was an educating moment. And I think that can happen more across all of us. I've done it to an Uber driver before. He was like, let the people in Central get shot this time. Maybe they'll feel what we're feeling. That's what he said to me. And I think he thought I was from Central. And I was like, nah, nigga, I'm not even from here, bro. So I was like, I had to toe like a really small line to get him to the side where it's like, if you allow another person to get harmed because you were harmed, that harm is going to boomerang back to you.
Do you know?
And by the end of the ride, he was like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't think like this. And I was so proud of myself.
Do you know that? And you should be proud, because you know why this is a very useful point to talk about is it removes the waiting on a savior with a white hat to come and rescue all of us, and it gives everybody the agency to actually do something about it. And we're all having these kinds of experiences. Yesterday, I walked into a store. Where was I? Yeah, I walked into a store, and the lady was like, yo, si utusaidia na hizi stories zenu. And I was like, okay, sawa, nitakusaidia, lakini wewe utafanya nini? Tuwezi fanya kitu, so unaona vile watu wana, you know. And I was like, no, man, like, you know, if we all say that, then all of us are going to become victims of our situation. And this is not victim shaming or victim blaming. It's just telling people that you actually have more agency and more power than you do. And rather than like fly into a blind rage about it and sort of like engage that nihilistic part of you, right, that could burn everything down.
Exactly.
Let's use this to build, you know, to build a country, right? Speaking of which, in 5 weeks, there will be an opportunity to debate, you know, the monies that are going into building the country, so to speak. Angela has contorted her face into something that tells you what the streets are feeling right now. Tom, you've been looking at the budget policy statement and all of the things that are coming out with regard to the 2025-2026 finance bill. And is there something to smile about? Is there something not to smile about? Where are we now?
I'm just looking at Langella from the side of my head. She's shaking her head already. Well, from where I sit, it's a much leaner document compared to what we saw last year, which is good, right? It's good. Justine is saying no, but I feel it's better because last year we saw a lot of essential commodities being taxed. This year it's not the same, which is a good thing, right? Last year they had VAT on, there was even motor vehicle tax and at some point. This was just excessive. And now we're seeing a lot more targeting, closing these loopholes of tax and just trying to make sure that all those exits are closed and the tax collection is more efficient. Not in raising commodity taxes, although that's possible in some sections of this, right? So for instance, there's the zero rating, from zero rating to tax exemption of some products. And there's a list, give me 1 second. So this basically means that for zero rating, Jan, you had a really good grasp of this last time. So zero rating and tax exemption. Zero rating means you can get back your input VAT after the product has gone out, right? And then for tax exemptions, it means output VAT is not given back, right? But the final product VAT isn't.
Thomas passed his exams.
Isn't there, right? So if you look, it depends how you look. Just saying, clap. Just
I'm so proud of you. We did like a whole session.
I know.
And then we both forgot. And then now you're just like, I'm fluent in this.
I know.
So nice.
I'm so proud. But anyway, so back to the subject. This means that some commodities could see a price increase because it means that these people, this tax that they were able to claim back in their outputs, they won't be able to do it. So they'll increase the amount that they charge on this product, which is a bad thing. But which products are these? From what I saw, it looks more like it's targeting raw materials. So for instance, input on raw materials for pharmaceutical manufacturers in Kenya, Which begs the question why? Because the government is big on locally manufacturing vaccines and a bunch of other things.
Shauri zenu.
And then also transportation of sugar from farms to milling factories. It's kind of like, why? You're supposed to revive these things.
Yeah.
It's better to keep them at input VAT because that's where most of the cost goes to, right? And then taxing of locally, the supply of locally assembled and manufactured mobile phones.
Yeah.
Again, why? Supply of electric bicycles. Why you're supposed to be boosting EV. The supply of solar and lithium ion batteries. Why?
That's crazy.
Inputs of or raw materials locally purchased or imported for the manufacture of animal feeds. Again, why? So the government wants to increase its tax income at the end of the financial year. But then the question is how? And they need to increase it in a significant way. So what do? They can't tax the essential products like milk. That would cause an uproar like we saw last year. So they go to, I feel, the farthest point from people, like where they're not facing the people more, they're facing the manufacturers and producers of things.
And that's an interesting point to make. And Nanjala, I want to bring you in here. Hearing what... sorry?
I don't know about zero.
I didn't know either. It's fine.
We have Tom here who will educate us. But I want to ask maybe like a broader question about this finance bill as opposed to last year's, right? So last year's was a lot more brazen. Even if you saw the statements from the president, you know, no country has ever developed with this low tax rate, etc. Then, you know, the activities of June take place, and we've had a year where that has been the anchor for the discussion around how this country is governed, how we create wealth, how we tax wealth and opportunity, etc. And then you have what seems to be a very tame finance bill in, you know, following up from that. Is this an olive branch to the people who felt like the finance bill was a poke in the eye last year? Or is this just a government that doesn't seem to have a clue about how to be able to manage the economy with so many, I guess, if you know, to use the analogy, a perfect storm of circumstances. You have a restive populace, you have global uncertainty, you also have, you know, problems locally because of debt, etc. You also have the monkey on our back, which is corruption. So there are all of these multiplicity of problems, and yet there is a country to run. But then you have this finance bill that seems very tame in comparison. What are your thoughts?
The answer is C, which is people need to also pay attention to the supplementary funding. And a lot of the stuff that gets snuck in through the supplementary legislation that goes through in between the finance bills, and a lot of the changes that happen in between finance bills. That's how they got away with a lot of the stuff. That they've been sneaking it in very under the radar. And I think that partly, you know, what I like about one of the options that you offered is that, there's an element of these guys have no idea what they're doing. It feels like we're living in an economy that's being managed in 1985, except it's 2025, and we need an economy for 2025 that understands that the vast majority of people in Kenya are casual laborers. They're not salaried workers, and increasing taxation on salaried workers places an undue burden on salaried workers to carry the economy. They're the people who are getting hit the hardest by all of these increases, because they're the people who can't get away from some of these legislative bottlenecks. There is so many other things that money's being spent on. Why does the KDF need to build a university? Why does the Foreign Service need to build a university? Why isn't that money being funneled through TUK, which is almost on the cusp of shutting down? So there's a problem with the way in which the spending is being structured that makes all of the stuff that's happening with the finance bill. And this was the argument. Kenya doesn't have a taxation problem. Kenya has a spending problem. This was the argument with the finance bill. Why do we have so much spending on the executive? Why do we have so much spending on the military? Why do we have so much spending on defense and no spending on education? We're dependent on donor funding for education. We're dependent on donor funding for health. And so I think a lot of the things that the subtext that got lost in the way the executive understood the finance bill was that people sat down and went through the budget item, and said, you need to give us a budget that recognizes that we have all of these crises, spend whatever, and we cannot be spending so much money on renovating State House. And we cannot be spending money on building universities, while public universities, on which the vast majority of people are dependent, are struggling. And I think we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen the executive come back to us with a budget that says, you know what, we recognize that our spending priorities don't necessarily align with what the public wants, and here is a budget that recognizes that. The challenge that we have with going after solar, for example, you know, going after the things that people do to survive, is that it will just create another pool of angry people to add to the angry people, right? We should be reviving the sugar industry, right? We should be trying to expand the manufacturing base, not going after the manufacturing base because we've been unable to prioritize spending in other parts of the budget. So I think that more than an olive branch, this is really a deflection, that we need to keep our attention also in the supplementary budgeting that happens in the interim, and we need to be paying attention to the same energy that we saw with people going through the budget line item by line item. And hopefully this time it will be civil society. I'm looking at you, not dependent on, you know, people volunteering the time, although that's fantastic in its own way. But really to see that what's going to happen when we're not all looking. This finance bill is going to be a lightning rod, because not just domestically, internationally people are paying it. It became an international point of conversation. So after that storm has passed, what happens in between, I think we should also keep an eye on that.
All right, Justine, you have something to say, I'm sure, but as you're saying it, just to speak also to the moment outside of the numbers, speak to the symbolism of what June 25th was last year. It feels, or it felt like a Sabasaba moment, right? So maybe speak to that moment as well, as you sort of like bake in the numbers and what this ought to mean and what this period, these next 5 weeks ought to be like for Kenyans.
So I think I'll just like add to some of the clauses I think that were missed. So I have a friend who works in like budget breakdown, and like she understands this part of governance like really well. So 3 of the things she really pointed out to me was that multinational corporations are able to set up here. Most of them are going to get a tax holiday. But the taxes they're going to pay, they're going to be less. I think it's going to be 20% or 10%, but Kenyan manufacturers have their taxes going up. And I'm like, are you incentivizing outsiders, or do you just hate like regular Kenyans? The second thing she pointed out is, so the industrialization condition in the country is going to be really bad, but they did this thing where it's like if a multinational corporation comes here, a big chunk of the people working in the company should be Kenyan, especially in top management, so that the skill level can stay in the country. And I'm like, okay, I guess, but the company is still not Kenyan.
And I have thoughts about that, but finish your thoughts.
And then the third thing that she pointed out was they redefined what a digital lender is. So this is going to end up burdening middle and low income people who go to like Shylocks or like use Mshwari to like even get the day-to-day money. Sometimes people are not borrowing for business. So the moment you make it, you make credit very inaccessible to a lot of Kenyans. This whole, we should entrepreneur our way out of poverty. No one is going to have any money. Like all of us are just going to be owing someone money, and someone is coming after you, so you're being hounded for money you don't have. And essentially what that boils down to is literally just the same anger that we were seeing last year. So even if you don't tax the bread, you don't tax the milk, if you're taxing where I'm getting the money, then what?
Then what are you doing?
Exactly. So there's a dismissal of what Kenyans, again, this just boils down to what you said earlier. There's a dismissing of what Kenyans' pain points are. It's like we do have people in governance who are not budgeting for school and budgeting for hospitals, budgeting for agriculture. We're seeing them budget for State House getting a flat roof. maybe they're gonna do like a croc room. I don't know. You know, like it's just. I feel like the priorities just keep shifting and like to the extreme nonsense. Like we need but we need a center.
Brought to you by Crocs.
Yes. Exactly. Like we need a center of functionality. Like people who do understand. A lot of Kenyans want very simple things. Like our asks are so simple, bare, minimum that. The fact that they don't understand what our asks are and they keep giving us speeches, let me stand on top of a car, Ruto must go is not a slogan. No one cares about any of that stuff. You're not even doing your job. Like when was the last time he was at his job?
At his desk.
No, like campaigning is not your job. Literally, your job is to do work. Like, I don't know what. I don't know. Like, why are you outside?
That is
you're not a weatherman. Yeah, you're not a
adding in the words of
just
do work.
Yes.
Exactly. Najala, I want to bring you in this on this because you have a view on this that's both local but also because your perch is kind of like around the world, there's also a global perspective to this. There's a shifting international order that all of this, if you were to call this a play, right? So this Kenyan act is happening within the context of this wider story, this arc of tariffs, of an emerging multipolar world, and those pressures will also be experienced here. What's the conversation that we are not having here about how those pressures are impacting what's happening at home?
Yeah. Well, there's two things. One is when Justine was talking, I was thinking about when I spent a couple of months in Kinshasa.
Yeah.
And I would go to the supermarket, I would walk the supermarket. And when you go into the supermarket in Kinshasa, at the time, I don't know what it's like right now, you would find milk from Belgium, milk from South Africa, maybe milk from Kenya. You would find tomatoes from Belgium, tomatoes from South Africa, local tomatoes, cheese from Belgium, cheese from South Africa, like all the products, you would get that. I don't think that this government appreciates how rare it is that I can go to Chandarana or whatever supermarket and I can buy Kenyan milk and Kenyan cheese and Kenyan bread. Like, in terms of developing countries, that doesn't happen very often. So for you to go after those people and not offer them any kind of relief, to me, that's a really red flag. And saying that we're going to prioritize international companies over local companies, because what happens with these MNCs is that there's a lot of transfer pricing. We end up paying more for the same, and we already do that with a lot of commodities that are imported, right? You end up with a lot of transfer pricing. You end up with a lot of, is it going to be local expertise? No, because those people are going to get promoted and they're going to leave. They're going to go somewhere else where their expertise is meaningful, right? It ends up trapping a lot of people in low wage, low skill labor that has very little opportunity for advancement. And so your people who actually benefit from that economic structure end up being smaller and smaller. And you see this all across Francophone West Africa. You see this all the time, that there is a lot of importation of really basic things. Why am I in Ivory Coast drinking French milk? Why am I in, Guinea buying French cheese? And this is a situation that so far Kenya has been able to, for the most part, not entirely, for the most part, avoid. So I would urge the government to think about this carefully. In going after local manufacturers and privileging international manufacturers, MNCs, are you setting yourself up for more problems? And the frustrating thing is, I only took economics for 1 year. This stuff was in the textbooks. The problem with MNCs, we studied all of this stuff. So why are you doing it again?
And the interesting thing about the debate right now is actually that, well, for want of maybe wisdom or what have you, Donald Trump is actually seeding a very important conversation about
and that's the second part.
Exactly, about what an economy should be based on.
And
right?
that's the second part. Your friends are seeing the world and are positioning themselves and are readjusting. You are running around with your begging bowl looking for handouts. Like,
looking for a big bro.
Looking for a big bro. Someone protect me. And the thing is, every crisis can be an opportunity. Donald Trump is objectively a crisis. He's a crisis for Kenya. right? We are in many sectors. Education and healthcare stand out the most.
Yeah.
We're dependent on donor funding to make some of these systems work. When USAID went, it also went with data collection. There's so many data sets that we don't actually hold as a country. I'm not sure what the next DHS is going to look like, right? When
Can I just so you can answer it together?
Yeah.
There's something that I wrote down that I was going to ask you. So Kenya launched, what is it called? Like do you think AI is going to be not only weaponized, but we're going to lose so much political mileage, and even like the campaigns that people are running online, and also like what, because the chatbot itself is run by OpenAI, it's not Kenyan.
No.
So can you speak to just how much is going to be lost in what people keep congratulating as progress when we don't even own the things
we don't
that are
own
being
the
made?
things.
Yeah.
And this is the challenge that a lot of countries face with these. And again, this is a global problem. This is not an African problem. So right now, a lot of Europe has the most comprehensive legislation over digital technologies in the world, between the Digital Services Act and the AI Act and the GDPR. They've really locked in on a lot of, they say, human-centered policymaking in tech. And now that there's all of this realignment happening in the US with the tech companies being on the side of, you know, what many people are rightly calling a fascist administration, the question mark is, the European countries trying to court these investments. Should they lower the human rights standards to attract the investments? Should they keep the standards and make sure that when these people come to invest, they play ball by our rules? And this is a big conversation that's happening. There's a lot of difference of opinion between the European Commission and the European Parliament. But the upshot is, it's the same conversations that we had many years ago about diamond companies. It's the same conversations that we had about Coca-Cola. It's the same conversations that we had about multinational corporations. They might make your budget look good because now you have an office and it has a valuation and whatever, but are they actually in your country?
Are they adding value?
Are they adding value to your country, or are they extracting and adding value to the parent company? So in the context of tech and AI, it's data. The big problem that has existed with a lot of AI, LLM, large language models, is that there's a lot of silence on data about Black people. Because our data is not captured in the same, you know, when you have a social security card in the US, it follows you from birth to death, and even supersedes you in death. It tracks every financial transaction, it's attached to your banking information, it's attached to your passport, it follows you all around. And so far, the way that they've been securing that data set is that they've been keeping things separate, so that there is such a thing as having too much information. One of the things that's happened with the Trump administration now is this Elon Musk Department of Government Accountability, rolls her eyes, is that they have gained access to this information. And it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem because what if you're trying to get health insurance, right? I have a medical condition and your health insurance says, well, we see that when you were 17 years old, you tried marijuana and you got arrested, and therefore we're not going to give you health insurance for your tooth. Two completely unrelated things, but the pernicious way in which healthcare works in the US, this is a very real risk.
It can be weaponized against
Banking,
you, for sure,
You're a Black person. Redlining is still happening in the US, that Black people pay more for financial services than white people. That your house, the same house, can be valued differently depending on whether the pictures on the wall are of Black people or of white people. So this is very active. So now all of that data sitting in the hands of private companies whose primary incentive is to make money, right? These are the red flags that people are pointing out, that you cross a border and your criminal record precedes you. That you can't actually travel because you've been, I think the word is social credit, that your social credit is too low for you to have access to basic services. So all of which is to say that because there's been all of these silences on Black people and African people, people in the developing world, there's just not enough information about how you spend money. We're all, a lot of us are still cash first, a lot of us are still, healthcare is, let me go and speak to the mganga kiasi, let me go and to the pharmacy. Most of us get our primary healthcare provider is the pharmacy. The pharmacy doesn't care. What do you want? Is it a headache? Take a Panadol, right? Did you break your arm? Take a Panadol. Are you sneezing? Take a Panadol. With the antibiotic resistance. This is all coming because most of us don't see formal healthcare. So there's an effort now to try and capture that information because that information captures means that I can turn you all into consumers. I can sell you more things.
And I look, this is a long-running conversation that we're having in this country about SHA and where that data is being held.
Yeah.
Who owns that data? What they can combine it with, and how they can repackage it into solutions that then we can't opt out of, right? And for me, again, that's the real danger. That because this conversation doesn't involve us at any stage, then we become almost like a default part of the systems that are being created that we cannot opt out of, that we have no option of how to be able to build, and we have again no agency in doing it. The analogy that you use is perfect. It is exploitation of the raw material being us all over again.
It's the difference between how Botswana does diamonds and how Sierra Leone does diamonds. Right? Botswana does diamonds, and they noticed this very early on. They were like, this is a problem. You're going to have to polish these diamonds here. Don't buy diamonds. Diamonds are dumb. But you're going to have to polish those diamonds here. You're going to have have offices here. And now it is directly contributing to the economic health of the country. On the other hand, very generous diamond deposits in Sierra Leone, civil war, fighting, extraction, very minimal processing. It's changing now with the new administration, but for a long time, very minimal diamond processing was happening in the country. And in fact, they only got the conflict. They only got the fragility that came from it. And the difference between those two countries is policy. The difference between those two countries is governments, is who do you put on the ballot. And so the difference between how African countries benefit from digital technologies, whatever they may be, is going to come down to who occupies power. Is there interest in maximizing extraction, right? Helping multinational corporations get the most out of our populations with the least input, with the least security, with the least protection? Or are they going to say, actually, let's create an opportunity for us to build a tech system that actually reflects people's interests? How do Kenyans use healthcare? How do Kenyans interact with their primary healthcare providers? Who are their primary healthcare providers? It's community health workers. So, and it's not unprecedented. There's so many, I think about indigenous populations in New Zealand who opted out of the centralized data protection structure and developed their own code of, if you're dealing with indigenous populations, this is how our data sovereignty should be structured. And they developed a whole ethic around that. I think there's so much talent and there's so much potential and there's so much, we have the people. If you look up who is who, the Africans who are in international tech companies, you will see a critical mass of Kenyans who can't do what they would like to do in their home country because
but have
the government
to do it elsewhere. That's true, both actually at every level of employment in some of these global companies, both at the exploitative level, which we had spoken about with Mercy Mutemi was here, but also at the C-suite level, right? Now, I want us to
we can talk about Trump, but we can talk about it later.
Okay, yes. Unfortunately, there is no later. There is only now, and we have very few minutes.
Oh, you just spoke like Trump.
Or did I? And I did it, and I you know what? I should stop thinking about when I do it. That way it'll come out better. Like I've been practicing this impression of Trump, like the whole season. And every time I try, you guys look at me badly. Anyway, let's wind this down, right? With another African conversation, right? And I'll just get kind of final thoughts from each of you. Ibrahim Traore has, bar none, become the symbol of nouveau sort of like African leadership and statesmanship and Pan-Africanism, to the extent that last week there were huge protests, right? Out of the statements that were made by this American general, right? And that's kind of problematic for me.
Yes.
Right? Not because some of the things that are being said about him aren't true, but because we're not seeing the whole story.
Yes.
Right? Like we're not seeing the whole story. Who is he really if journalists can be sent to the front lines for criticism? You know, he is a person in charge of a country that for sure suffers from the same things that you're talking about. Huge import bill, no control over its exchequer, no control over its finances and its currency. A country that is besought by violence, right, that has been brought on by another Western conflict, right? So there are a lot of challenges that he is in charge of now trying to sort of like put together. And it might be an imperfect way in which he's doing it, but he's doing it much to the agreement of many African people. My problem is that it's not the whole story. Yes. So we shall start from that side, and then we come this way. Nanjala, final thoughts. And maybe let's compare and contrast with what we have here.
Sure. The one thing I would say to my fellow Africans, I call them my MFAs, when it comes to Traoré, when it comes to all of these Sahelian leaders, is two things can be true at the same time. And we have to reject these false binaries that tell us that one set of conditions can only exist at the exclusion of the other set of conditions. It is true that the neo-colonial legacy in Burkina Faso is very real, very present. Like you said, they have no control of the exchequer. It's one of those countries whereby the yogurt is imported, the tomato sauce is imported. It is, definitely. I've spent time in Burkina Faso, and yeah, that side of it is true. It is also true that the Burkinabe army under Traoré has massacred so many civilians. Ordinary Africans who were just trying to put food on the table. It is also true that journalists in Burkina Faso are in fear for their lives. It is also true that opposition politicians are being summarily arrested, detained for expressing dissent. Those two things are true. And if there is anything that I would want to impart to every single African, if I had the capacity to do it, it would be that you deserve to be led by people who love you. You deserve to be led by people who care whether you live or die. You deserve to not be stuck between these two false choices. So there is a PR campaign behind Traoré. There is a political interest, and it goes back to sort of international politics. There is a informational war that is being fought between Mali all the way to, I would say, even Sudan, that is stuck between this global realignment that's happening between Russia and the United States. There is an informational, and this even Meta has said it, that Central African Republic, Mali, Burkina Faso, they're being bombarded by misinformation coming from both France and Russia, right? So not everything that you see online is true. And I would want people to listen to what people in Burkina Faso want. Not just the headlines, not just the sleekly produced, memeable quote. What is actually happening in Burkina Faso? And it's difficult because of this linguistic split, that a lot of the stuff is happening in French and is not translating over into the Anglophone space. And a lot of the Anglophone people are dealing with a version of Burkina Faso that isn't necessarily the reality of the country. So I would want to see, in practical terms, I would want to see more of the reality of what has been happening in Burkina Faso represented for Anglophone audiences. But that would be it. Two things can be true at the same time.
And we have a comment here that actually speaks to that. I think his name is Explorer, says, I don't know why all his speeches feel like AI. Is he real? Right? Which kind of speaks to your point.
Anybody in the Anglophone space actually heard him speak?
Yeah.
What does his voice actually sound like?
That's true. So, look, anyway, Tom. Yes, can we give us your thoughts?
I think I expressed my thoughts on Traoré some weeks back. It's not the whole story. It's not the whole story. You've seen investigations done on his massacres, especially in this war against jihad, what he likes to call, and where he sends civilians to the front lines. You speak to people from Burkinabe and the story isn't what you see online. I mean, I like the videos, right? The videos of the blue and green flags look nice. The men in Ghana issuing a press conference saying, don't touch him, you don't touch him. I don't know if you guys have seen that Facebook video that I'm speaking about. It was in Ghana. But again, it's the same argument that we're having here in Kenya, where you're told that you have to find an evil person, you can never have a good guy. Those good guys
there's only shades of grey.
Exactly. You can't find there's no angel in this game. We're all terrible.
Kenya's whole thing being 50 Shades of Grey is so masochistic.
And Justin, this is why this is the entire reason you are here. Out of nowhere. This is the entire reason you are here.
No, you said shades of grey. It was right there.
It was begging to be said.
Should have said beige.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Tom,
that's just it. That's just it. Yeah.
All right, Justine. 50 Shades of Traore versus 50 Shades of Ruto. Where are you thinking we should? How should we pass these two thoughts?
I have a few things and to say. I'll wrap it up with the whole people who are leading these countries. I just want to speak but about the people of Angata Barakoi. Shout out to you, man. That was badass. Like, you guys sat with like the police IG and you just told them, we're just gonna shoot you niggas. Like, that was funny. That was really funny. Because I think a lot of people keep forgetting that these communities have been like thriving and like figuring out how to live with each other for a very long time. And when someone else wants to buy property or like steal property or like take from a community, it takes the whole community coming together to like protect that property. And I think that's what they were alluding to. It might have sounded really violent and very vengeful, but they know what it feels like to be taken from. Because a 6-year-old child, a 15-year-old boy, and I think 4 other, really young people were among the people who were harmed. And like them just standing up and saying, we're going to Cupid's arrow for our land, that was really dope. Like
Cupid's arrow.
I was like so impressed by
like,
them.
Tom, are we writing down this? I swear. Anyway,
I'm telling you.
I was really proud
you
that...
don't have a 50 Shades of Kenya meme.
Yeah, I promise you. No, we are working.
So I just wanted to say, like, communities standing up for themselves and having the conversations about what they want their land to look like, what they want their prosperity to look like, that should be the leading point for a lot of us. Like, don't come there and tell them, I'm going to build you a factory. Who cares about your factory if the people there are not eating? Like, you have to care about the people there. Again, it's like Africans should really, really want to be led by people who love them. And sometimes the people who really, really love you are your community. Those are the people who know you at your lowest, know you at your highest, show up at your graduation, show up when you don't have money. Like, those people are so important to you. So the people of Angata Barakoi, shout out to you. And I know they burnt your sugarcane farms, but you'll get your lick back. Me, I'm here. And secondly, I'll just say, Kenyans, I know we're out there and we are trying to get by and we're trying to fight back as much as we can. And I'll just say, if shoes can aspire to greater heights, so can you. Don't settle. Keep going. And lastly, just to like wrap up with like the difference in power structures and the people who are in positions of power across the African continent, I think Africans have to find an identity that's not, we are anti-neocolonialism. That cannot be your whole identity.
Your whole thing.
Yeah, your whole thing is like, they stole from us, yes. But a lot of people are also continuously complicit because they don't know what other way to exist. We need to start having conversations about what we want our continent to look like, what we want our countries to look like, what we think prosperity is, what our imagination, again, what our imagination of high achieving, happy, thriving Kenyans, Ugandans, like what that looks like. And I think we've seen it. We've seen glimpses of it. There's a friend of mine, an online friend of mine, who shared a photo across from, I think, his house, where the neighbor had eaten like half a sugarcane and like passed out. And I think that guy understands what freedom is. Like, you don't have to be working the whole day, you know. Like, you can have your miwa and you pass out and you wake up and you go about your day or about your life. And I think if you have a life that accords you to rest and fight, not resting like the way MPs are resting and like getting paid for it. Your soft girl era is hurting us. Like, you can't do that. So I think Africans should imagine better. I know we are stuck between like we want a tough looking leader and we want someone who understands the system or like has the strict dad to beat our enemies. Please. love yourself. Like, get a dad who actually loves you,
Or a
and
mom.
like, or a mom. Yeah, get a mom. This is your chance to like do the Mama Africa thing, right? You can actually, you can fix that. It's a mentality thing. It's an imagination thing, and I think if we just work at it, if we have conversations with each other, we'll get there.
May I know that was supposed to be the last word, but you made me think about something that Edward Said, I think he was quoting Fanon, said, are we only fighting for the end of colonialism, which is a worthy goal, or are we thinking about what we will do when the last white policeman leaves?
Yes.
You know, I'm hard put to sort of place it in better words, but you guys were kind of all sort of like drawing out my thoughts as you were talking, and what came to me at the end of this was the analogy of the superhero, right? So in some ways that analogy can be problematic, but I'll use it this way, in maybe perhaps a way that isn't so problematic. A superhero sometimes is the wildest dream of a person's sort of like greatest potential. And I think sometimes we confuse that aspiration inside of us, you know, and sort of like wish it onto our leaders and say that I wish our leader was a superhero. He could lift and do and fix and, you know, just, you know, lasers up all of the corrupt people, you know, with something. But being a superhero is not being the Hulk. It's not being, what's your favorite superhero?
I don't have a favorite superhero, but I will go with
Kendrick Lamar.
Yes, Kendrick Lamar is my favorite superhero. Yes.
Yeah. So being a superhero is not that. For me, it's a daily act of choosing to like aspire for something better, right? And there are many small analogies that can be used to sort of like explain that. My favorite one now that I'm a dad is make your bed, right? Like make your bed, achieve something, right? Achieve something, write down your objectives. And try and see where you land at the end of the day. Those daily acts of just trying to achieve what it is that you have the potential to do, for me, is the building of the lexicon that you will require in future when you're required to make bigger sacrifices and perform bigger acts and aspire to greater goals, right? Let's not rest on this idea that there's going to be a savior, right? Let us not rest on that. Let us rest on the idea that we have within us the potential, the language, the character even, to have the conversations that we ought to be, as you said, angry and use that anger, right, in a way that directs us to where it is we all want to go. And without being so preachy, let's stop with the idea that we cannot, right? Right, and that's why I really loved that the expression that you had at the end there. Like, what are we going to do?
Yes,
right.
The last one.
When the last person leaves, if Ruto must go is the aspiration, what happens after that? Right, what happens the day after?
Yes,
right, and it's this vision building, this dream building that we all have to engage in some way and to make actual definite steps towards that. I loved this episode, I have to say. I mean, I love every episode, right?
I love you, my kid.
Yes. But I really did love this episode, and so did the people who are online. Like, I'm seeing really interesting things. Missed Call says the guest is talking sense. Umeongea points mingi sana hapa, Nanjala, right? Dabzone agrees with you, Justine. True, we can't entrepreneur our way into an economy that has no cash flow. Let's see. Roshera says, Justine is, and said, they've written it. Justine is really speaking. We do need to use our imaginations beyond the trauma, beyond the isms. And I think these comments sort of speak to why this show was important. So, Nanjala, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to upset you again and do that. I did it a second time. All right, let's see. Where is it?
I hope you destroying the environment is what.
Yeah. Well, every query that goes into ChatGPT consumes half a liter of water.
Gosh,
just hit him with that.
Then let me use this half liter of water
wisely.
Nanjala Nyambola writes like a scalpel cuts.
Oh.
Clean, precise and impossible to ignore. Political analyst and an author who redefines what it means to speak truth to power. She challenges how we see migration, democracy, and digital life, especially from the global south. And on this edition of The Big Picture, she spoke truth like many of us cannot. Nanjala, thank you very much for coming and for spending your time. She's in and out of the country, so I appreciate how precious this time is, right? Yeah, guys. Yeah, sorry.
This is like, I'm so happy because I wrote your name on the people who are supposed to come to the show, and then you came, and I was like, I did that.
Yep.
That's nice.
We
I'm
did.
very happy to be here.
We did it, Joe.
We did it.
Guys, this has been a great edition of The Big Picture. If you want to catch this episode again, of course, it's going to be online on YouTube. It's also going to be on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, as well as many other sort of like, what do you call those platforms. We have cut downs everywhere and all of these great points that have been made by Nanjala. Tony is going to fix. Tony is our social media guy. He's there pointing at me. I'm pointing at him. And it's kind of like a shout out, but kind of like a threat. Usituangushe. So, my name is John Allen. Justine, Tom, thanks a lot. Nanjala, once again. We'll catch you on the next one next week. Big picture, great guests, great perspectives. As always, we'll see you on the next one. Cheers, guys.
In the next episode, we return to Westlands and South B in Nairobi, two neighborhoods where forceful evictions and demolitions disrupted lives and livelihoods.
I have worked to buy this house. It wasn't very easy. So I'm not giving it up on it. And I'm going to have it back. Wait for me, I know I have it back.
Unapiga picha. Kama iko go power, then you should be worried. If you don't have anything to worry, then you wouldn't worry.
2 years later, what has changed? What hasn't? And what does it say about land justice in Kenya today?
We've been out of this place for 2 years until today, 2024, is when we are back to our premises. I mean, it's shocking to see what we found.
It seems that Kenya is run by goons and not by police.
In the next episode, we return to Westlands